I woke up on the morning of my surgery to an empty house. Not unusual. My parents had already left for my sister Emma's college orientation, 3 states away. The refrigerator hummed in the silence. No note, no text, just the appointment card I'd taped to the bathroom mirror 2 weeks ago, now curling at the edges from shower steam. The surgery was scheduled for 2 p.m. A routine procedure, the doctors had said, though the consent forms I'd signed alone told a different story. Risks, hemorrhaging, infection, anesthesia complications. In red letters at the bottom, emergency contact required. I'd forged my mother's signature. What choice did I have? My phone buzzed. Emma's Instagram story. A selfie with mom and dad at some overpriced brunch spot, all three of them laughing. The caption read, "Family Day, so blessed." I didn't appear in a single frame. I never did. I should mention, I've lived this day before. I died on the operating table the first time around at 2:47 p.m. from a complication the anesthesiologist missed. I was 19, alone. The last thought I had before everything went dark was wondering if my parents would even interrupt Emma's orientation to come identify my body. They did, eventually. 3 days later, after Emma's campus tour was complete. But now I'm 18 again, standing in the same empty kitchen, holding the same appointment card, and this time I'm making a different choice. I opened my phone and canceled the surgery. Then I did nothing. I didn't call them, didn't text, didn't remind them. Just like they'd forgotten to take me, I let them forget the surgery was supposed to happen at all. Let me tell you how I got here, how my own family turned me into a ghost long before I actually died. The favoritism started when I was 7 and Emma was 9, and I don't remember a specific moment when it began, just a gradual dimming, like someone was slowly turning down my volume while turning Emma's up. My school art was met with distracted nods. Emma's soccer participation trophies got frames and wall space. My straight A report cards were expected. Emma's B minuses were celebrated as improvement. By the time I was 12, I'd learned to stop trying. What was the point? The real shift came when Emma decided she wanted to be a fashion designer. Suddenly, every spare dollar went to her. Fabric, mannequins, sewing classes with a professional in the city, $300 an hour. My parents took out a loan to build her a studio in the garage, complete with industrial equipment and professional lighting. I asked once if I could take piano lessons. They cost $40 a month. "We need to invest in Emma's future," Mom said, not looking up from her phone. "She has real talent. You understand?" I understood perfectly. The medical issues started when I was 16. Abdominal pain, sharp and persistent. I mentioned it at dinner once. Dad grunted. Mom told me to take some Tylenol. Emma was in the middle of describing her acceptance to a prestigious summer design program that cost $12,000, and my organs were an inconvenient interruption. The pain got worse. I started missing school, doubling over in the bathroom between classes. I made my own doctor's appointment, walked 40 minutes to the clinic because I didn't have a car and couldn't ask for a ride. The doctor, an older woman with kind eyes and a concerned frown, ordered an ultrasound. Ovarian cysts, large ones, the kind that could rupture, that could twist my ovary and kill the blood supply. Surgery was recommended sooner rather than later. I came home with the diagnosis, the ultrasound images, and the surgery recommendation. I put all of it on the kitchen table where my parents were helping Emma prepare for a design competition. "That's nice, dear," Mom said absently, not even glancing at the papers. "We're a bit busy right now. Emma's portfolio is due tomorrow, and we still need to get her entry professionally photographed." Dad drove Emma to a photography studio that evening. The session cost $800. My surgery consult got scheduled for 3 weeks later. I took the bus. Emma needed the car for a fabric shopping trip. The surgeon explained everything in detail: laparoscopic surgery, general anesthesia, recovery time. He kept asking where my parents were. I told him they were working. He looked at me the way that doctor at the clinic had, with that same worried recognition of something wrong beyond the medical. "You're going to need someone to drive you home," he said, "and someone to stay with you for at least 24 hours after. This is a requirement, not a suggestion." I nodded. I lied. I said my mother would be there. "The surgery got scheduled for 6 weeks out. Plenty of time to plan," the scheduler said brightly. I took the appointment card home and immediately asked my parents to save the date. "Of course, sweetie," Mom said, typing something on her laptop. She was helping Emma draft her college application essays. "Just put it on the calendar." I put it on every calendar we had. The kitchen wall calendar in red marker, the family Google calendar. I even set reminders on both their phones when they left them unattended. But then Emma got her college acceptances, and everything else ceased to exist. She'd gotten into her dream school, a prestigious design program in California. The orientation was mandatory, a full week of activities and preparation. It was scheduled for the exact same week as my surgery. "You'll have to reschedule," Dad said when I brought up the conflict. "I've already rescheduled twice," I said. My voice was shaking. "The cysts are getting bigger. The doctor said, then reschedule again." He turned back to his computer where he was booking flights to California. "This is Emma's future we're talking about. Surely you can understand that's more important than a minor medical procedure." Minor. As if I hadn't shown them the consent forms that listed all the ways I could die. I tried to reschedule. The next available appointment was in 4 months. The surgeon's nurse, the same kind-eyed woman from before, sounded worried. "That's a long time to wait with cysts this size. Are you sure you can't make the original date work?" I wasn't sure of anything anymore except that my parents had already booked non-refundable tickets to California and that Emma's happiness would always, always matter more than my life. So I kept the original appointment. I told myself they'd remember, that they'd cancel the trip or one of them would stay behind, that when it came down to it, they wouldn't actually abandon their daughter on the day of a risky surgery. I was wrong. The morning of the surgery, I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of suitcases being loaded into the car. I stumbled downstairs in my pajamas, still groggy, not quite believing what I was seeing. "Oh, you're up," Mom said, checking her watch, "but we're heading out early to beat traffic. Emma wants to get breakfast near the campus." "My surgery is today," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. "It's at 2 p.m. You said you'd take me." Mom frowned. "Your surgery? Honey, I thought you rescheduled that." "I told you I couldn't. I told you multiple times. It's been on the calendar for 6 weeks." "Well, you'll have to figure something out," Dad said, closing the trunk. "Call an Uber or something. We've got to get Emma to orientation. This is important." And they left. Emma didn't even look back, too busy scrolling through her phone in the back seat. I stood in the driveway until the car disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside, sat on the kitchen floor, and cried until I couldn't breathe. But I still went to the surgery. What else could I do? The pain had been unbearable for weeks. I took an Uber using money I'd saved from the part-time job at the library that my parents didn't know I had because they'd never asked how I spent my time. The pre-op nurse kept asking where my family was. I kept lying, saying they were parking, they were on their way, they'd be there soon. She didn't believe me. Nobody did. But they couldn't force me to have an adult present for the surgery itself, only for the discharge. "I'll take a cab," I told them. "I'll be fine." The anesthesiologist was young, rushed, checking boxes on forms without really looking at me. Later in the records, I never got to see because I died. There would be notes about how he miscalculated the dosage, how my reaction to the anesthesia was atypical, how by the time anyone noticed something was wrong, it was too late. The last thing I remembered from my first life was the feeling of the anesthesia hitting too fast and too strong, and my lungs forgetting how to work. I tried to signal the nurse, but my arms wouldn't move. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then nothing. Death wasn't dramatic. It was just absence. One moment I existed, and the next I didn't. No white light, no tunnel, no dead relatives welcoming me home. Just nothing, and then, impossibly, everything again. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, in my childhood body, staring at the ceiling I'd memorized over 18 years of life. My phone said it was 6 months before the surgery. 6 months before I died alone because my parents loved my sister more than they loved me. The knowledge came with me, all of it, every moment of neglect, every forgotten promise, every time Emma's needs eclipsed my existence. And now this time I had a choice. I could try to make them love me, fight for their attention, beg for their care, remind them over and over about the surgery until maybe, possibly, they remembered. Or I could do something else entirely. The decision crystallized 3 weeks into my second life at Emma's birthday dinner. She was turning 20, and my parents had rented out an entire restaurant, a trendy place downtown that cost at least $5,000 for a private event. Emma wore a custom dress she'd designed herself, holding court at the head of the table while friends and family toasted her talent, her bright future, her wonderful parents who supported her dreams. I sat at the far end next to a cousin I'd met twice. Nobody toasted me. Nobody even noticed I'd arrived late because I'd had to take the bus. I'd asked Dad for a ride that morning, and he'd said, "Can't you see I'm busy? Emma needs help setting up decorations." I watched them, really watched them. Mom adjusting Emma's hair for photos, Dad proudly showing off Emma's design portfolio to relatives, Emma herself glowing in the attention she'd received every day of her life, completely oblivious to the fact that she had a sister slowly dying of neglect in the same house. And I realized they would never change. I could beg, plead, cry, show them medical records and surgery consent forms, and it wouldn't matter. Emma would always be the sun, and I would always be invisible. So why was I trying to make them see me? The pain started again 2 months before the surgery date, right on schedule. This time, I went to the doctor alone without even mentioning it at home. Got the same diagnosis, scheduled the same surgery. When the scheduler asked if I wanted to put a reminder on my parents' calendar, I said no. I didn't tell them about it at all. Instead, I started planning. The foreknowledge from my previous life was an advantage I died to obtain, and I wasn't going to waste it. I knew exactly how the next 6 months would unfold. Emma would get her college acceptances in March, 4 of them, including her dream school. My parents would spend April agonizing over costs and programs, ultimately deciding on the California school because we only get one chance to support our daughter's dreams. The orientation would be scheduled for early May, the mandatory week-long program. My surgery would be scheduled for the same week because that was the only appointment available. The first time around, I'd rescheduled and rescheduled, trying to make everyone happy until I had no choice but to keep the original date and hope my parents would choose me over Emma's orientation. They didn't. This time, I accepted the surgery date immediately, confirmed it 3 times, never mentioned it to my parents once. Emma's acceptance letters arrived right on schedule. The celebration was massive. Another expensive dinner, champagne, tears of joy. Mom and Dad were so proud they could barely speak without choking up. Emma's Instagram post about her acceptance got 2,000 likes in an hour. I watched from the doorway, unnoticed as always, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place exactly as I'd known they would. In mid-April, Emma announced the orientation dates. "It's mandatory," she said at dinner, showing them the email. "All accepted students have to attend. It's a full week of workshops and preparation." "Of course we'll go," Mom said immediately. "Well, we'll make it a family trip. We can explore California together." "Actually," I said quietly, "I can't go. I have something that week." They all turned to look at me, surprised I'd spoken. "What could you possibly have?" Dad asked. I shrugged. "Just something. But you guys should definitely go. Emma needs you there." I saw the relief on their faces. Permission not to include me, not even to ask what my conflict was. Emma was already talking about what to pack, and just like that, I disappeared from the conversation again. Perfect. Over the next few weeks, I watched them plan the California trip with meticulous care. Hotels, rental cars, restaurant reservations. They took time off work. Mom bought new outfits for the orientation events. Dad researched every detail of the campus and surrounding area. The surgery remained my secret. I kept every appointment, met with the surgeon twice more for pre-op consultations, had all the required blood work done. I took myself to everything, paid with money from my library job and a credit card I'd gotten without telling anyone. The surgeon's office kept asking about my emergency contact. I kept providing my mother's number. Nobody needed to know she had no idea she was listed. Nobody needed to know that when they called her the day of the surgery to confirm her attendance, she wouldn't even recognize the hospital's name. 2 weeks before the date, I made one final preparation. I wrote a letter, not to my parents, but to my father's older brother, Uncle James. He lived across the country, worked in corporate law, and had been estranged from Dad for over a decade after some family dispute about money. I barely knew him, but I knew one crucial thing. He'd tried to reach out to me once when I was 15, sending a birthday card with his phone number written inside. Dad had thrown it away without showing me. I'd found it, in the trash later, crumpled but legible. I'd kept the number, though I'd never used it until now. The letter was simple. I explained the surgery, the risks, and the fact that I'd be completely alone because my parents were prioritizing my sister's college orientation. I included copies of all my medical records and the surgery consent forms. I didn't ask for anything. I just stated the facts and added one line at the end. I thought someone in the family should know, in case something goes wrong. I mailed it priority, calculated to arrive at his office exactly 3 days before the surgery. Then I waited. The morning of the surgery arrived exactly as it had before. I woke to an empty house and suitcases being loaded into a car. But this time, I didn't go downstairs. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel particularly sad. I simply canceled the surgery. The scheduler was surprised. "This is very last minute," she said. Are you sure? The doctor was concerned about the size of the cysts. Waiting could be dangerous. "I'm sure," I said. "I'll reschedule when my family can be there." It was a lie, of course. I had no intention of rescheduling. But it sounded responsible, like something a good daughter would say. I spent the day in my room doing absolutely nothing. At 2 p.m., the exact time I'd died in my previous life, I was lying on my bed, scrolling through my phone, very much alive and breathing. Emma's Instagram was full of orientation photos. My parents looked so happy. At 2:47 p.m., I closed my eyes and let myself feel the weight of what I'd just prevented. In another timeline, I was dying right now. The anesthesiologist was panicking. Nurses were shouting. My heart was stopping. But in this timeline, I was fine. And my parents had no idea how close they'd come to killing me through sheer neglect. The guilt trip would come later, I knew. They'd eventually remember that something medical had been scheduled, that they'd probably missed it. They'd call, apologetic and defensive. They'd say they thought I'd rescheduled, that they'd gotten confused, that surely I understood how important Emma's orientation was. And I'd forgive them. I'd say it was fine, that I'd canceled it anyway, that it wasn't a big deal. I'd let them think they'd gotten away with it one more time. My phone rang at 6 p.m. "Uncle James." "I got your letter," he said without preamble. His voice was deep, serious, nothing like Dad's. "Tell me you didn't actually have that surgery alone." "I canceled it," I said. A long pause. "Good, that's good. But the cysts are still there. I'll deal with it eventually." Another pause. "Your parents don't know about any of this, do they?" "No." "And your sister's orientation?" "They're there right now, having a wonderful time, from what I can see on social media." I heard him exhale slowly. "I need you to send me everything. Every medical record, every bill, every piece of documentation about your condition, and I need you to start keeping a record of every interaction with your parents. Dates, times, what was said. Can you do that?" "Why?" "Because I'm going to fix this," he said, and his voice had gone cold in a way that reminded me he made his living destroying people in court. "I'm going to fix all of it." Uncle James flew in 3 days later. I met him at a coffee shop near the house while my parents were still in California with Emma. He was tall, gray-haired, with Dad's same sharp features but kinder eyes. He sat down across from me, ordered us both coffee, and pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I've been looking into your parents' finances," he said, "and your sister's educational fund." I blinked. "How did you—" "I'm a lawyer. I have resources." He opened the folder. "Did you know your grandmother left you money? A trust fund, specifically designated for your education and medical expenses. $50,000, set up when you were born." The coffee shop went silent around us. Or maybe that was just my ears ringing. "What?" "Your grandmother, and your father's mother, died when you were 6. She left trust funds for both you and Emma, equal amounts. The money was supposed to be untouchable until you turned 18, managed by your parents, but only to be spent on education, medical care, and essential needs." He slid a bank statement across the table. I stared at the numbers, the dates, the transaction descriptions. The trust had been emptied. $47,000 gone. The transactions told a story: Emma's sewing equipment, Emma's design classes, Emma's summer programs, the garage studio renovation, her college application portfolio photography. Everything Emma had received, every opportunity and advantage had been bought with my money. "This is illegal," Uncle James said quietly. "Misappropriation of trust funds. Your father was the trustee. He had a fiduciary responsibility to preserve your inheritance for its designated purposes. Instead, he stole from you to fund your sister's hobbies." My hands were shaking. "My surgery, I couldn't afford the copay. I put it on a credit card. I've been working at a library to pay it off. And the whole time you had $50,000 that your grandmother specifically left for exactly this situation." His jaw was tight. "I'm sorry. I should have checked on you sooner. I should have pushed past the estrangement with your father and made sure you were okay." "You didn't know." "I should have." He closed the folder. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to file a lawsuit against your parents for misappropriation of trust funds. We're going to get every penny back, plus penalties and damages, and then you're going to let me help you set up a life where you never have to depend on them for anything ever again." I thought about my parents in California, posting happy photos with Emma, completely unaware that their world was about to implode. I thought about Emma, who'd built her entire identity on opportunities bought with stolen money. I thought about myself at 19, dying alone on an operating table because asking for help had been trained out of me through years of systematic neglect. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." The lawsuit papers were served 3 weeks later, right as Emma was preparing for her high school graduation. A process server showed up at the house with documents for both parents, detailing the misappropriation charges, the full accounting of the trust fund theft, and the demand for immediate repayment. I wasn't there when it happened. Uncle James had set me up in a small apartment near the university, paid for with a loan against my future settlement. I was finally scheduled for surgery at a different hospital, one where Uncle James would be my emergency contact, where I'd have proper post-op care, where nobody would let me die alone. But I heard about it from Emma, who called me crying. "What did you do?" she sobbed. "Dad got served with some kind of lawsuit. They're saying he stole from you? That's insane. You're tearing this family apart over money." "Over my grandmother's money," I said calmly. "That she left specifically for my education and medical care. Money Dad spent on your sewing classes and college applications." I didn't know it was your money." "Would it have mattered if you did?" Silence. Then, "You're being so selfish. This could ruin Mom and Dad. They could lose the house, and for what? To punish them for loving me?" "No," I said, "to hold them accountable for stealing from me while I was bleeding internally and couldn't afford surgery." "You never said you needed surgery." "Yes, I did, multiple times. You were all too busy with your portfolio to listen." She hung up on me. I didn't call back. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Uncle James had built an airtight case: bank records, emails, receipts, all showing a clear pattern of trust fund misappropriation. The fact that I'd nearly died because I couldn't afford proper medical care while tens of thousands of my own dollars were being spent on Emma's extracurriculars made it particularly damning. My parents tried to fight it at first. They hired a lawyer, not a good one, because good lawyers are expensive, and they were already financially overextended from Emma's lifestyle. Their defense was that they'd intended to pay it back and that they'd been providing for both daughters equally, just in different ways. The judge was not impressed. "You spent $47,000 of your daughter's medical trust fund on sewing equipment and photography sessions," she said, reading from the case file. "While that same daughter was suffering from a serious medical condition and couldn't afford treatment. That's not providing equally. That's theft." The judgment came down in my favor. Full repayment of the trust fund plus 10 years of interest and penalties. The total came to $73,000. My parents had 30 days to pay. They didn't have it. Of course they didn't. They'd spent everything on Emma, and now they were drowning in debt. The house went up for sale. Emma's college fund, the legitimate one that Grandma had left for her, got drained to cover the judgment. She'd have to go to state school now instead of the prestigious California program. Mom called me once during this period. "Are you happy now?" she asked. Her voice was brittle. "You've destroyed everything. Your sister's future, our retirement, the family home, all because you wanted to be a victim." "I am a victim," I said. "I'm the victim of parents who valued one daughter so much they were willing to let the other one die." "That's not fair. We would never—" "I had surgery scheduled. You knew about it. You chose to go to Emma's college orientation instead." "I went alone and almost died." A pause. "What are you talking about?" "You never had surgery." "Because I canceled it. The morning you left. The morning I woke up to an empty house and realized you'd actually done it. Actually abandoned me on the day of a risky medical procedure to take Emma to California." "You never told us about any surgery." "I told you multiple times. I put it on every calendar we owned. You just never looked because Emma's needs were more important." "Well, you should have—" I hung up. There was no point. She would never accept responsibility. In her mind, she was the real victim, the good mother being persecuted by an ungrateful daughter who didn't understand sacrifice. The irony was suffocating. My surgery finally happened 2 months later, at a better hospital with a better anesthesiologist. Uncle James took the day off work to be there. He sat with me before the procedure, held my hand when they wheeled me back, and was the first face I saw when I woke up. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Alive," I said, and started crying. The recovery took 3 weeks. Uncle James checked on me every day, bringing groceries and keeping me company. He told me stories about my grandmother, the woman I barely remembered but who'd loved me enough to leave me a protection I desperately needed. "She knew," he said one afternoon while I was dozing on the couch. "She knew what your father was like. She knew he'd play favorites. That's why she set up the trusts, as she did, with specific restrictions. She was trying to protect you both from him." "She failed," I said. "No, she gave you the tools to save yourself. You just had to be old enough to use them." He squeezed my shoulder. "She'd be proud of you. I'm proud of you." It was the first time in my life I could remember an adult being proud of me for something other than making myself invisible. The settlement money came through while I was recovering. $73,000 appeared in a new bank account Uncle James had helped me open, one my parents didn't even know existed. It was more money than I'd ever had, more than I'd ever imagined having. It was mine. My grandmother's gift, finally received. I used it the way she'd intended. I paid off my medical bills and the credit card debt from the canceled surgery. I paid Uncle James back for the apartment loan. I enrolled in the university for the fall semester, choosing a program in finance because I never wanted to be financially vulnerable again. I even splurged on a good used car, something reliable with working air conditioning. For the first time in my life, I had what Emma had always had: security, options, hope. The difference was, I'd earned mine. Emma's graduation came and went. I didn't attend. She didn't invite me. She started at the state university that fall, commuting from home because there was no money for her to live on campus. Her Instagram, once full of professional photos and design inspiration, became sporadic and bitter. She'd had to get a job at a retail store to help cover her tuition. Her posts were now complaints about rude customers and early morning shifts. I felt nothing watching her fall from grace. Not satisfaction, not guilt, nothing. She'd lived her entire life on stolen resources and hadn't questioned it once. Now she was learning what it meant to work for what you wanted. Welcome to my world, sister. My parents' house sold in October. They moved to a small rental apartment, downsizing from 4 bedrooms to 2. Dad had to take a second job to cover the debt. Mom went back to work after years of being a stay-at-home mother dedicated to managing Emma's career. They sent me a Christmas card that year. It was generic, the kind you buy in bulk from the pharmacy. The message was printed, "Wishing you joy this holiday season." No personal note, no apology, no acknowledgement of anything that had happened. I threw it away. Uncle James invited me to spend Christmas with his family instead. His wife, his 2 adult children, his grandkids. They welcomed me like I'd always been part of the family, asked about my classes, listened to my stories, remembered details I mentioned in passing. His daughter gave me a sweater she'd knitted herself. His grandson showed me his Pokemon card collection. It was the best Christmas I'd ever had. Over dinner, Uncle James's wife asked me if I'd heard from my parents. They sent a Christmas card, I said. Nothing else? What else would there be? She exchanged a glance with Uncle James. An apology, maybe. Some acknowledgement that they failed you. I shook my head. They don't think they failed me. They think I failed them by holding them accountable. That's not how family works, she said quietly. No, I agreed. It's not. But it's how mine worked. Uncle James reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your grandmother's family, he said. The people who love you not because they're obligated to, but because they choose to. That's your real family now. I looked around the table at these people, who barely knew me but had welcomed me anyway, and I felt something crack open in my chest, something wounded and careful that had been closed for so long I'd forgotten it could open. Thank you, I whispered. Spring semester brought more changes. I made the dean's list, joined a finance club, started tutoring for extra money even though I didn't need it anymore. I was good at finance, the same attention to detail and resource management that had kept me alive in a neglectful household translated well to budgets and investment strategies. One of my professors pulled me aside after class. Have you considered graduate school? With grades like these, you could get a full scholarship to any program in the country. Graduate school? More education? More opportunities? More distance between me and the life I'd escaped? I'll look into it, I said. That weekend, I drafted applications to MBA programs across the country, all of them far from home. All of them prestigious enough to make my parents choke if they ever found out. I got my acceptances in April. Full scholarships to 3 top programs. I chose the one in New York. The furthest away, the most prestigious, the most expensive if I'd had to pay for it myself. Emma graduated from state school that spring. Her degree was in graphic design, a pivot from fashion design since she couldn't afford the specialized equipment anymore. She moved back in with our parents, no job lined up, no prospects. I found out through social media, not from any of them directly. We hadn't spoken in over a year. On the day I left for New York, I drove past my parents' apartment. It was small, shabby, in a part of town that would have horrified the people they used to be. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I just noted that it existed, that they existed, and that their existence no longer had any power over mine. Graduate school was everything I'd hoped. I threw myself into the work, made friends who had no idea about my family drama, dated someone who thought I was brave for cutting off toxic parents. I got an internship at a major investment firm. I learned to wear suits and talk about market trends and pretend I'd always been the kind of person who belonged in glass towers. I was good at pretending. I'd had a lifetime of practice. During my second year, I got an email from Emma, the first contact in almost 3 years. Subject line, I'm sorry. I stared at it for 20 minutes before opening it. The message was long, rambling, clearly written over multiple emotional sessions. She explained that she'd started therapy, that she was working through her own issues, that she'd come to realize how complicit she'd been in my neglect. She acknowledged the stolen trust fund money, the forgotten surgery, the years of being chosen over me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she wrote. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what they did to Asabe. I see what I allowed to happen, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I read it 3 times. Looked for the angle, the manipulation, the request for money or reconciliation. Found nothing but what appeared to be genuine remorse. I didn't respond immediately. I sat with it for a week, showed it to my therapist. Yes, I was in therapy now, Uncle James had insisted, and tried to figure out what I actually felt. Turned out I felt tired. Not angry, not vindicated, not even particularly sad. Just tired of carrying the weight of what they'd done to me. I wrote back, "Thank you for acknowledging it. I'm not ready for more than that yet, but thank you." She responded immediately, "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you ever want to talk." I archived the email thread and went back to my life. I graduated with my MBA 2 years later, top of my class, with 3 job offers from major firms. I chose the hedge fund position, aggressive, lucrative, powerful, the kind of job that came with a 6-figure salary and stock options and a corner office view. Uncle James flew out for my graduation. So did his entire family, plus some cousins I'd only met a handful of times, but who'd somehow become invested in my success. They cheered when I walked across the stage. They took me to dinner at an expensive restaurant. They toasted my future with champagne and genuine pride. My parents didn't come, didn't call, didn't send a card. I hadn't expected them to. I'd stopped expecting anything from them the day I canceled my surgery and chose to save myself instead. But Emma sent flowers, a massive arrangement delivered to my apartment with a card that read, "Proud of you." I put them on my kitchen counter and stared at them for a long time, trying to figure out how I felt about this olive branch, this attempt at connection. Eventually, I sent her a thank you text. "Flowers are beautiful, thank you." Her response came an hour later. "You've become everything I pretended I would be. I'm genuinely happy for you." It was honest in a way Emma had never been before. I appreciated that, even if I wasn't ready to rebuild a relationship. I started my job in August, moved into a luxury apartment in Manhattan, bought furniture that wasn't secondhand or salvaged from someone's curb. I had a closet full of professional clothes, a pantry full of good food, a medicine cabinet full of vitamins I actually remembered to take. I had everything I dreamed of as a teenager bleeding internally in an empty house. The irony was the achieving part, the success, the money, the career, that had been easy. The hard part was learning to believe I deserved it. Learning that asking for help wasn't weakness. Learning that being valued wasn't something I had to earn through perfect silence and minimal needs. Therapy helped. So did time. So did building a life so far removed from my childhood that the two existences barely felt like they belonged to the same person. On the 2-year anniversary of my surgery, the one that happened, not the one that killed me, I took myself out to dinner at the nicest restaurant I could find. I ordered the most expensive wine, the chef's tasting menu, a dessert I didn't share. I toasted myself. To surviving, to choosing myself, to the grandmother I barely remembered who'd loved me enough to leave me a weapon against the family that tried to erase me. Then I went home to my beautiful apartment and slept peacefully for the first time in longer than I could remember. 3 years into my career, I made partner at the firm, youngest in the company's history. The announcement came with a significant raise, a profit-sharing agreement, and my name on the door. Uncle James called me immediately. "Your grandmother would have lost her mind with pride," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Hell, I'm losing my mind with pride. You did it, kid. You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected. "I wouldn't be here without you." "You would have found a way. You always find a way. That's who you are." Maybe he was right. Maybe I would have clawed my way here eventually, even without his help. But I was grateful I hadn't had to do it alone. The professional success brought other opportunities. I was invited to speak at conferences, write articles for finance publications, mentor young women entering the field. I said yes to all of it, built a reputation as someone who understood how to navigate systems that weren't designed for you to win. Because I did understand. I'd spent my whole life in a system designed for Emma to win and me to disappear. I'd learned to survive it, then learned to dismantle it, then learned to build something better in its place. That expertise translated well to the corporate world. During one mentoring session, a young woman told me her family didn't support her career ambitions. They wanted her to focus on getting married, having kids, being traditional. "What should I do?" she asked. "Stop waiting for their permission," I said. "Build the life you want and let them decide if they want to be part of it. Some people will rise to the occasion, some won't. Either way, you'll have your life." She looked at me with wide eyes. "Did you have to do that? Cut off your family?" "Yes." "Do you regret it?" I thought about my parents in their small apartment, about Emma working retail while trying to make her design dreams work on a budget, about all the years I'd spent begging for scraps of attention from people who were fundamentally incapable of seeing my value. "Not even a little bit," I said. I was 30 when my father died. Heart attack, sudden and massive. Emma called to tell me. The funeral's on Saturday, she said. Her voice was flat, exhausted. I'm not going to guilt you into coming. I know things are complicated, but I thought you should know. How's Mom? Destroyed. She's not handling it well. I felt nothing. No grief, no relief, no unfinished business. Just a distant acknowledgement that the man who'd stolen from me and neglected me was gone. I'll send flowers, I said. Okay, a pause. For what it's worth, he talked about you sometimes, near the end. He'd ask how you were doing if I'd heard from you. What did you tell him? That you were successful, that you were happy, that you'd built a good life without us. And what did he say? Nothing. He'd just nod and change the subject. Regret without apology, awareness without accountability. Typical. I'm sorry for your loss, I said, because that's what you're supposed to say. Are you? I appreciated her directness. No, but I'm sorry you're in pain. That's fair, she sighed. I hope you're doing well, really well. You deserve it. Thank you. We hung up. I didn't send flowers. I sent a donation to a medical charity in his name, one that helped young women access necessary surgical procedures. The irony felt appropriate. Mom didn't call, not to tell me about the death, not to invite me to the funeral, not to process her grief. I remained a ghost to her, just as I'd always been. Emma sent me a photo from the funeral, just the two of them, her and Mom, standing by a casket in a mostly empty room. No big crowd, no outpouring of community support. Just the remnants of a family that had cannibalized itself through favoritism and neglect. I deleted the photo without responding. Life continued. I dated, traveled, invested my money wisely. I bought a vacation home in Vermont, adopted a cat, learned to ski. I went to therapy until I didn't need it anymore, then went back occasionally for tune-ups. I was happy. Not performatively happy, not pretending everything is fine, happy. Actually, happy. Emma and I maintained a distant but cordial relationship. We texted on birthdays. She sent me links to articles she thought I'd find interesting. I sent her congratulations when she landed a good freelance design project. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't pretend to be close. We just existed in each other's orbit, two people connected by trauma and blood, and not much else. It was enough. Mom, I never heard from. According to Emma, she'd become bitter and isolated, unable to understand why her daughters had abandoned her. She told people at church that I was ungrateful, that she'd sacrificed everything for her children and gotten nothing but heartbreak in return. The story she told herself had no room for truth. I didn't waste energy being angry about it. She was a supporting character in a story I'd already finished writing. On my 35th birthday, Uncle James threw me a surprise party. His whole family came, plus colleagues from work, friends I'd made over the years, even a couple of ex-boyfriends I'd stayed friendly with. The apartment was packed with people who'd chosen to love me. Speech, someone called out. I laughed, uncomfortable with the attention, but also touched by it. I'm not good at speeches. Try anyway, Uncle James said, handing me a glass of champagne. I looked around the room at all these people, my chosen family, my earned family, the family I'd built after the one I was born into had tried to kill me through indifference. Okay, I said. I'll just say this. There's a version of my life where I died at 19 because I believed my family when they showed me I didn't matter. But somehow I got a second chance and I used it to bet on myself instead of waiting for them to choose me. Everything good in my life came from that decision. The decision to save myself and stop apologizing for taking up space. So thank you, all of you, for being part of the life I built after I decided I was worth building something for. The room erupted in cheers and applause. People hugged me, told me I was inspiring, said they were honored to know me. Uncle James pulled me aside later. Your grandmother would have been so proud, he said for the 1000th time. Tell me about her, I said. Tell me what she was like. He smiled. Fierce, stubborn, refused to be diminished by anyone. She had this saying, they'll only take what you don't defend. She lived by that, spent her whole life defending her right to exist on her own terms. Sounds like someone I would have liked. You're exactly like her, he said. That's why your father couldn't handle you. You reminded him of all the ways he'd disappointed her. It was the first time anyone had suggested that my father's neglect had been about him, not me. The first time anyone had implied that maybe, just maybe, I'd been too much like someone he'd failed, not too little like someone he could love. The realization settled over me like a warm blanket. Not because it excused anything, but because it confirmed what I'd always suspected. His inability to see my value was his failure, not mine. I'm 38 now, a senior partner at one of the most prestigious investment firms in the country. I manage billions in assets, mentor dozens of young professionals, and sit on the boards of 3 major corporations. My apartment is beautiful, my cat is spoiled, my life is full of people who value me, work that challenges me, and experiences that fulfill me. Emma and I have coffee twice a year when I'm in town visiting Uncle James. We talk about her design work, my latest project, the books we're reading. We don't talk about our parents, we don't talk about the past. We've found a comfortable distance where we can be friendly without pretending to be close. She's doing better now, steady freelance work, a small apartment of her own, a boyfriend who treats her well. She's in therapy, working through her own damage. She tells me sometimes that she wishes she could go back and do things differently. We all do, I tell her, but we can't. We can only do better going forward. She nods, accepts this, doesn't push for more than I'm willing to give. Mom is in assisted, living now. Early onset dementia, according to Emma. She doesn't remember much, not the favoritism, not the stolen money, not the daughter she neglected until that daughter chose to disappear. Emma asks sometimes if I want to visit her. No, I say, and I don't explain further. I don't need to. The irony isn't lost on me. Mom forgot me long before the dementia did. Now her forgetting is medical rather than intentional. Either way, the result is the same. Last week, I was invited to speak at my old university's graduation. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of students about to start their adult lives, I thought about the girl I used to be. Small, invisible, convinced her own survival was too much to ask for. I talked about resilience, about the difference between surviving and thriving, about how sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you need, and that's okay. You can build a new one. You can choose people who choose you back. After the speech, a young woman approached me. She was crying. "Thank you," she said. "My family doesn't understand me either. They want me to be someone I'm not. I thought that meant something was wrong with me." "Nothing is wrong with you," I said firmly. "You're just growing in soil that wasn't designed for you, so you have to transplant yourself somewhere better." She hugged me. I hugged her back, this stranger who reminded me of myself at 19, bleeding and alone and convinced she had to earn the right to be saved. "You matter," I told her. "You matter even when they can't see it, especially then." Sometimes I think about the surgery that killed me in my first life. I think about lying on that operating table, lungs forgetting how to work, heart forgetting how to beat. I think about dying alone because my parents were taking selfies with my sister at a college orientation. And then I think about canceling that surgery in my second life. I think about the choice I made to stop trying to be loved by people who were fundamentally incapable of loving me the way I deserved. That choice saved my life in more ways than one. I didn't need to die and be reborn to learn that lesson. But apparently, I did need to die and be reborn to believe I was worth saving. The foreknowledge was a gift. Not because it let me predict the future, but because it gave me permission to stop fighting for a family that had already decided I didn't matter. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for their parents to choose them. I spent one life doing that, and then I died. So, in my second life, I chose myself instead. And it turned out that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. On the night of my 38th birthday, I stood on my apartment balcony, looking out at the city lights stretched below me like constellations. I raised a glass of wine to the grandmother I never really knew, the uncle who'd saved me, and the girl I used to be who'd survived long enough to become the woman I am now. "We made it," I whispered to all of them. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, I hoped my grandmother was smiling. Because I'd done exactly what she'd wanted. I'd defended what was mine. I'd refused to be diminished. I'd built a life on my own terms. I'd survived the people who were supposed to love me. And then I'd thrived without them. That was the real revenge. Not the lawsuit, not the money, not even the success. The real revenge was being genuinely, completely, unapologetically happy in a life they weren't part of. They couldn't even haunt me anymore. I'd moved too far away from who I'd been when their opinion mattered. I finished my wine, went inside, and started planning my next adventure. Maybe Paris, maybe Tokyo, maybe somewhere I'd never been, with people I hadn't met yet, creating memories with my chosen family. The world was wide open, and I was finally free to explore it. All because I died once and learned the most important lesson. You can't wait for people to save you. You can't beg for the love you deserve. You can't make yourself small enough to fit into their neglect. You can only save yourself. And once you do, once you really commit to it, you discover something miraculous. You were always worth saving. You just needed to believe it enough to do it yourself. I believed it now, and that made all the difference.